Federal Reserve's upcoming instant payment service FedNow will be integrated with Metal blockchain, allowing Metal users to convert funds to stablecoin and vice versa using the FedNow system send and receive function. FedNow is set to launch in July and will enable round-the-clock near instant payments between banks. Metal blockchain, developed by Metallicus, offers compliance-friendly options for decentralized finance, DeFi developers, and emphasizes bank secrecy act compliance, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, and I'll give you the other story as well. The other story is Goldman, Microsoft, Cboe, and others team up to launch blockchain's network. This is a Bloomberg story. A group of firms, including Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, Deloitte, Cboe, Global Markets, is teaming up to launch the Canton Network, a blockchain system aimed at linking institutional applications and promoting wider adoption of distributed ledger technology in financial markets. The network offers improved privacy and controls along with scalability and standards suitable for financial institutions. What are your thoughts on these two stories? How do you think the market's going to respond to this?
I think both of these stories are nothing burgers, and I'll tell you why. I'll go through it. So Metal, with all respect to them, known the company or the protocol since they launched. Back in the day, they launched, and apparently Richard Branson was one of the investors, and they've been looking for an identity since. And I think that this announcement would impress me a lot more if the Fed came out and the Fed said, hey, we have picked this blockchain provider. So that's my response to the first story. I think it's a nothing burger. I think regarding the second story, by definition, blockchains are open public ledgers. Otherwise, they're just glorified databases. And they need to be permissionless and not controlled by anyone. And that is why Bitcoin has been so successful. And that's why Ethereum is the second most successful, because it's permissionless. It's not owned by anyone. It's not controlled by anyone. It's not swayable by anyone. When you're talking about these companies, these are exactly the companies that blockchain is trying to move away from them being controlled. And so, you can make as many announcements as you want, but ultimately, let's look at who's going to be using your blockchain and what they're going to be using your blockchain for. Right now, the most used blockchain you got two blockchains which are really both being used, which are Bitcoin and Ethereum. And the one thing that makes them both that used is the fact that none of these corporations are able to control it, structure it, fund it, finance it. They can use it as equal players as if we use it. And that's the beauty of these things. So I think it's like, both of these stories for me aren't really big stories. I think we'll hear about it here, and I don't think we'll ever hear about these stories again, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't follow the crypto stuff, the Bitcoin stuff as much, but I just look at this from the standpoint of a central bank digital currency, which I think is what most people are really worried about right
That's
now
scary.
when they read about FedNow. And FedNow is basically centralizing the settlement process in a clearinghouse that right now is done by a quasi-free market process. So whenever you have centralization of something like that, I don't like it. But I also want to highlight something that he was saying in using the word ledger, because people need to realize that money, or let's say currency, outside of green pieces of paper really doesn't exist. All it is a ledger system that says, hey, the bank owes you this much. And so it's like time. You really can't, all you can do is keep track of it, right? So my point here is when people hear FedNow, they get really freaked out about central bank digital currency, but they shouldn't. I want to make sure that people who value privacy, freedom, liberty, and free market capitalism focus more so on the ledger and less on the currency as far as the central bank digital currency. Because and I think that we're going into this tough time like we talked about earlier, and I think one of the solutions that they're going to provide so the depositors don't take a haircut is to move your deposits to the Federal Reserve's ledger, right? And when you move all of these deposits to the Fed's ledger, now you have that ledger centralized, including the back-end plumbing, which is FedNow. And that, by definition, gives you a central bank digital currency regardless of what they call it. So right now, when I see Florida banning central bank digital currencies, or I see Ted Cruz in Texas doing the same thing, I think that's great that it's bringing attention, but I'm very concerned that the global elite are using this as a diversionary tactic, because they're starting this central bank digital currency fire over here while at the same time they're creating an environment where you could centralize that ledger, and people are so focused on that central bank digital currency, they wake up in 6 months and they're like, how on earth do I have a social score? Because they don't realize that the fundamentals of a CBDC is moving all those deposits onto one ledger, more centralization. And that's the first thing that I think about when I see this article.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.